20 years ago, using the internet was unfamiliar to the majority of the population, and at that point, very few could have predicted that the industry would grow into the colossal global networking medium that it is today. Lifelong astronomer and professor at the University of Arizona, Chris Impey, argues in his book Beyond that space tourism would become what the internet was 20 years ago. Like the internet, space tourism would blossom into a multi-billion-dollar industry, becoming available to the general public and revolutionizing the human adventure. Impey claims that within the next 5 years, going to space will no longer be a luxury of the government and elite, but for nearly all people, just as the internet is today. But there will be some time before you or I will be traveling beyond Earth's orbit. But simply put, space tourism is a commercial industry, private or public, where people purchase tickets to be brought into the extraterrestrial world. This market has plenty of room for growth in the coming years as a result of projected public interest. The only trouble will be avoiding asteroids, like costs and regulations. But because we could be experiencing these feats in the near future, today we will examine the origins of modern-day space tourism, the industry-changing applications and implications leading to a dynamic population shift. Because as Forbes News stated on July 6 of 2017, with a market like this, our world could be changed forever. In much the same way as the internet took time to become popular among society, space tourism is getting through that process right now, warranting us to examine the origins of modern-day space tourism, which involve first the early stages and second the government restrictions that ensued. The origin of space tourism was the purchase of a ticket by United States millionaire Dennis Tito on April 28th of 2001, according to Space.com, which monitors all international space accomplishments. But even in these early stages, there were some inhibitors slowing down these accomplishments. For instance, as BBC News noted in their May 9, 2017 report on the progress of space tourism, Virgin Galactic, a private space company, suffered a fatal accident in 2014, just one of nearly a dozen the market has seen. After this occurrence, the company lost an abundance of followers and faced major financial setbacks. These inhibitors, as well as the public memory of the Challenger explosion, are preventing space tourism interest from reaching what it was at one point supposed to be. Next, government restrictions have slowed down space tourism's process tremendously, put into place by our government as a safety precaution. Stephen Hogue wrote of some of these policies in his report from the Nebraska Law Review of 2007, titled Legal Aspects of Space Tourism, which highlights that most United States companies currently abide by the Spaceship One model, stating that all space tourist trips must have a detachable rocket that returns to the location of liftoff. Additionally, as long as waivers are signed 90 days prior to the trip, these companies may assume as much or as little liability for the safety of the passengers, provided they still wish to travel. The likely reason behind such forcible government actions is pointed out by Universe Today, who noted that with the expansion of space exploration and these fatal accidents comes the lofty responsibility of governing space. However, Space Daily, updated daily, noted that this effort has been tremendous by the space community, and the Office of Commercial Space Transportation, commonly known as AST, issued the Space Launch Amendments Act, which used diction, allowing the government to halt all operations at any sign of a hiccup. Understanding now that space tourism is on the rise, we can begin to look at what the market is doing today by identifying first today's travel and second the current innovations for rockets. As it stood on July 17th of 2017, the Pew Research Center noted that just over 500 people have traveled above the Kármán line, a point 62 miles above Earth that marks the beginning of space. Of these over 500 travelers, the vast majority were astronauts, but space tourists actually account for 57 of them. In addition to these travels being taken upon by our fellow civilians, these travels when they began were occurring about once every 3 months, or 4 times a year. But now people are surpassing that same Kármán line once every other week. In addition to the frequency of travel going up tremendously, new businesses are sprouting as a result of this very change. Specifically, Trend in Tech, a news agency who reports on new inventions, mentioned that entrepreneurs Ted Sumner and Nikolay Mazev co-founded a new company called the Final Frontier Design. They are currently hitting the jackpot with their multi-billion-dollar invention with what is serving as the likely suit of apparel for travelers in this fresh market. Next, we can also examine the current innovations for rockets and how specifically they are revolutionizing this adventure. Elon Musk's company, SpaceX, decided to take on this initiative by targeting the least efficient part of the spacecraft, the rockets themselves. They told a teleconference on NBC News on April 4th of 2017 that they're currently creating massive Falcon Heavy rockets as part of their future Dragon ship designs. In accordance with the Spaceship One model mentioned earlier, these ships would take off and return to the location of liftoff, with a caveat: reuse up to 12 times. If this initiative manages to fall into place, our worlds could be forever changed, because people will have the initiative to lower these costs tremendously, allowing people like you or I to begin to fly. Knowing now that the market is in fact on the rise, we can begin to look at how the market will be progressing in the future by identifying how first, space tourism could divide our classes, but second, how it could unite us as well. The aforementioned NBC article continues to posit that SpaceX has an even more ambitious goal of sending colonists to Mars by 2020. Elon Musk is trying to create a 100-person Mars colonial spacecraft transporter, which will be ready in 2020. And a trip to the Red Planet at that point will cost about anywhere from $500,000 to $600,000. Not affordable for most of the world's population. The eventual goal is to lower this cost to $100,000. Still an incredible feat and not affordable for most of our world. The bottom line is, while these initiatives are great and phenomenal for the people who can afford them, for most of us, they're just fantasies. The bottom line is that space tourism allows the digital divide to continue to occur in our world. Those who already have access to great technology are extending their access beyond our borders, while those without it are left struggling to survive on the basic needs for survival. While space tourism, though, could initially divide our classes, it could end up uniting us as well. This story can be told by Franklin D. Roosevelt. When he decided to make the space race a legislative priority, he affirmed that we would land men on the moon within the decade. While FDR was not around to witness that feat, it did become a reality. And in much the same way that FDR united American interest in space then, us too, with the right initiative, could unite American interest in space tourism now. This initiative could be taken place by AV Jobs, who stated in 2017 February that they have an initiative to transport colonial spacecraft airporters to public commercial use. They want to allow planes to take off, soar beyond Earth, travel through the atmosphere, and back down to Earth, reducing time tremendously due to the lack of gravity. This initiative would be a phenomenal feat, allowing our world to stay interconnected. At a time in which face-to-face interaction is dying out in our world, traveling intercontinentally at far cheaper and far faster times will continue to allow face-to-face interaction to thrive. Throughout all of human evolution, the idea of what was beyond Earth has shifted, and now that scientific breakthroughs are on the verge of becoming a reality for normal citizens, we're going to be able to answer those questions ourselves. So today we began by examining the origins of modern-day space tourism, its initiative for its applications, and its industry-changing implications. So just like the internet began to integrate its way into society 20 years ago, space tourism will be achieving those feats soon, managing to alter our race and changing us forever.